He wasn't just a customer, he was a king in a bespoke suit, and his kingdom tonight was this hushed Michelin-starred restaurant. His name was Beck Wilder, a man whose net worth was whispered about in the same reverent tones as ancient legends. Across from him stood Giselle, a waitress whose only net worth was the desperate hope she carried for her sick brother. When Beck, bored and cruel, decided he wanted more than just his five-star meal, he demanded entertainment. He threw down a challenge like a gauntlet, a humiliating dare for a few $1,000s. He expected a shy, clumsy song. He expected to be amused by her failure. What he got instead was a voice that silenced a room, shattered his composure, and unearthed a ghost he thought he had buried long ago. This isn't just a story about a hidden talent. It's a story about how one song in one moment can unravel a life of secrets, grief, and untold regrets. The scent of garlic butter and expensive wine was the perfume of Giselle Rutledge's life now. It clung to her uniform, her hair, her very skin, a constant reminder of the world she served but could never join. Each night at Aria, perched atop one of New York City's glittering skyscrapers, she moved with a practiced, almost invisible grace. She refilled water glasses before they were empty, cleared plates with a whisper of movement, and offered a smile that never quite reached her tired gray eyes. Her colleagues, a mix of struggling actors, artists, and career servers, saw her as quiet and efficient. They knew she was saving money for something serious, but no one pried. In a city of 8 million stories, you learn to respect the privacy of pain. They didn't know about the faded photograph tucked into her wallet, the one of her younger brother Liam, his smile wide and genuine before the diagnosis. They didn't know that every dollar she earned from tips, every cent she saved by eating ramen in her shoebox apartment, was a drop in the cavernous bucket of his medical expenses. Liam had been diagnosed with a rare degenerative nerve condition 18 months ago. The experimental treatment that offered a sliver of hope was located in Switzerland and cost a fortune that sounded like a cruel joke. So, Giselle had put her life on hold. More accurately, she had dismantled it. She had dropped out of the Juilliard School, where her professors had spoken of her mezzo-soprano voice in terms of generational talent. She had packed away her sheet music, sold her beloved cello, and traded the grand stages of her dreams for the polished floors of Aria. The sacrifice was a raw, open wound inside her, but the thought of Liam's laughter fading was a pain far worse. Her life was a metronome of exhaustion, the clatter of the subway at dawn, the long hours on her feet, the forced politeness, the weight of 1,000 small indignities, and then the quiet dread of her apartment, where she would count her tips and check the balance of the GoFundMe page that had barely moved in months. Her voice, the part of her that had once felt most alive, was now a silent prisoner in her throat. Singing felt like a betrayal of her current reality, a luxury she couldn't afford when Liam's future was at stake. Some nights the music piped into the restaurant, a soft classical melody would catch her off guard. A familiar passage from Bach or a haunting Chopin nocturne would drift past, and for a heart-stopping second, she would be back in a practice room, the resonant wood of the cello vibrating against her chest, her voice soaring to fill the space. Then a customer would snap their fingers, the spell would break, and she would be just a waitress again, the ghost of the music mocking her. Miles away in a sprawling minimalist mansion overlooking the Hudson, Beck Wilder existed in a world of profound silence. His life was the antithesis of Giselle's. Where she had noise and chaos, he had sterile order. Where she had the warmth of human contact, he had the cold touch of glass and steel. He was the founder and CEO of Wilder Dynamics, a ruthless tech conglomerate that had swallowed competitors with the dispassionate efficiency of a black hole. He was a titan of industry, a visionary, a predator. His face graced the covers of business magazines, his expression always a mask of impenetrable confidence. But inside the silent house, the mask came off. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence left behind by a person who was no longer there. 5 years ago, Beck's wife Isabella had died. She was a brilliant concert violinist, a woman whose spirit was as vibrant and passionate as the music she played. She was the one who had filled their home with life, with laughter, with soaring concertos that danced through the halls. Beck hadn't just loved her. He had orbited her the stoic planet to her radiant sun. Her death in a senseless car accident had shattered him. But instead of grieving, Beck had worked. He poured all his energy, his rage, his sorrow into his company. He became more ruthless, more detached, more successful. He built an empire on the ashes of his heart. He saw vulnerability as a terminal weakness. He excised it from himself and punished it in others. The art and music they had once shared became a source of torment. He had her violin, a priceless Stradivarius, locked away in a climate-controlled vault. He never listened to classical music. He couldn't bear it. It was a language of emotion he no longer allowed himself to speak. His employees feared him. His business partners respected his mind but detested his methods. He had no real friends, only associates. He moved through the world insulated by his immense wealth, a ghost in his own life, haunted by the memory of a melody he refused to hear. Tonight, a multi-billion-dollar acquisition he had been pursuing for months had collapsed at the final hour due to an unexpected regulatory hurdle. It was a public failure, a chink in his armor, and it had stoked the cold fury that always simmered just beneath his surface. He needed a distraction. He needed to exert control over something, anything, to remind himself that he was still the master of his universe. So he had his driver take him to Aria, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, a place where perfection was demanded and paid for. He intended to find fault with everything. He was a man looking for a target, and the universe in its cruel and intricate design was about to give him one. The moment Beck Wilder walked into Aria, a subtle shift occurred in the restaurant's atmosphere. It was like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. The maitre d', a seasoned professional named Marcus, who had seated presidents and movie stars, felt a prickle of anxiety. Wilder didn't carry the easy confidence of old money. He radiated a tense predatory energy. "A table, the best one." Beck said, his voice low, and clipped, not even making eye contact with Marcus. He gestured vaguely towards the panoramic windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city's jeweled skyline. "Of course, Mr. Wilder, right this way." Marcus said, his professional smile firmly in place. He led him to the coveted corner table, a semi-private alcove that was the restaurant's crown jewel. Unfortunately, that table was in Giselle's section. She saw him approach and felt an instinctive clench in her stomach. She'd served difficult customers before, the entitled, the rude, the condescending, but this man was different. There was a palpable coldness emanating from him, a void that seemed to suck the warmth from the air around it. She straightened her apron, took a deep breath, and approached the table. "Good evening, sir. My name is Giselle, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with some water, perhaps a drink from the bar?" she asked, her voice calm and professional. Beck didn't look up from the menu. He waved a dismissive hand. "Sparkling water, Italian, and bring me the wine list." The entire meal was an exercise in quiet tyranny. He sent back the first bottle of wine, a $900 Chateau Margaux, claiming it was corked, though Giselle and Marcus both knew it was perfect. He complained that his steak cooked medium rare as requested was a degree too cool. He spoke to Giselle not as a person, but as a malfunctioning appliance, his words sharp and impersonal. Each interaction was a small cut, a calculated assertion of his power over her. Giselle absorbed it all with a placid exterior, her years of training and her desperate need for this job forming a shield around her. Inside, however, a slow burn of anger and humiliation was building. This man, with his bespoke suit and his casual cruelty, was everything wrong with the world. He could spend more on a single meal than she earned in a month, yet he treated her as less than human. She thought of Liam, of the sheer injustice of it all, and her grip on the serving tray tightened. The breaking point came with dessert. Giselle was approaching the table with a bottle of expensive dessert wine he had specifically requested. At that exact moment, a busboy rushing past bumped her arm just slightly. It was a minor jostle, but it was enough. A few drops of the golden liquid, a sauternes, costing hundreds of dollars a bottle, splashed onto the sleeve of Beck Wilder's immaculate suit jacket. Silence descended on the table. The busboy froze his eyes wide with terror. Giselle's heart plummeted into her shoes. "I am so sorry, sir. It was an accident," she stammered, grabbing a clean napkin and dabbing uselessly at the dark spot. Beck Wilder slowly, deliberately looked down at his sleeve. He then lifted his gaze, and for the first time that night, he truly looked at Giselle. His eyes were like chips of ice. "An accident," he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. This suit is handmade. The fabric is irreplaceable. Your accident has just cost you more than you make in a year." Marcus, the maitre d', rushed over. "Mr. Wilder, please, I am terribly sorry. The entire meal, everything is on the house. We will, of course, cover the cost of cleaning or repair for the jacket." Beck held up a hand, silencing him. His cold gaze remained fixed on Giselle, who stood frozen, mortified. He saw her pale face, the slight tremble in her hands. He saw a vulnerability he could exploit. The frustration from his failed business deal, the anger at his own powerlessness earlier in the day, had found its outlet. He leaned back in his chair, a cruel, contemplative smirk touching his lips. "No, that's boring," he said, his voice carrying in the now hushed restaurant. "I don't want your money, Marcus. I want to be entertained." He turned his full attention back to Giselle. "You," he said, pointing a finger at her. "You look like you have a story. People with sad eyes always do. I'm bored. My evening is ruined. My suit is ruined. You will make it up to me." Giselle stared at him, confused. "Sir, sing," he commanded. The word hung in the air, absurd and shocking. The few patrons close enough to hear turned to stare. Marcus looked horrified. "Mr. Wilder, that is completely inappropriate," Marcus began. "Shut up, Marcus!" Beck snapped his voice like cracking ice. He looked back at Giselle, his eyes glinting. "I'm serious. Sing something, right here. Entertain me. If you do a good job, I'll forget about the suit. In fact..." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick black wallet, and extracted a stack of $100 bills. He counted out $10,000 and placed the stack deliberately on the edge of the table. $10,000, he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's what your little performance is worth to me. Sing for your supper, little bird. Or you can walk out of here, and I'll have my lawyers send this restaurant a bill for damages that will ensure you never work in this city again." Humiliation washed over Giselle in a hot, sickening wave. He was putting her in an impossible position. To refuse was to risk her job, the very lifeline that kept her brother's hopes afloat. To accept was to be a circus animal performing for the amusement of a cruel master. Every eye in the restaurant was on her. She could feel their pity, their morbid curiosity. She looked at the stack of money. $10,000. It was a staggering sum. It was a flight to Switzerland. It was a consultation with the specialists. It was a tangible piece of hope. It was more than she could make in 3 months of swallowing her pride and serving men like him. Her mind raced, her pride, her dignity. The memory of what her voice was meant for it all screamed at her to throw the wine in his face and walk out. But then the image of Liam, his face getting thinner, his smile weaker, flashed in her mind. The faded photo in her wallet seemed to burn against her hip. Her pride was a luxury. Liam's life was not. She closed her eyes for a moment, shutting out the staring faces, shutting out the cold, arrogant man in front of her. She took a deep, shuddering breath. When she opened them, the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "Okay," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but clear in the silent room. Beck Wilder leaned back, a triumphant smirk on his face. He had won. He was about to be amused. "Anything in particular you'd like to hear?" Giselle asked, her voice now, strangely calm, almost defiant. He waved a hand dismissively. "I don't care. Surprise me." Giselle nodded slowly. "I will." She unclipped her server's apron and folded it neatly, placing it on an empty chair. She stood up straight, her posture shifting. The slumped, tired waitress disappeared, replaced by something else, something poised and centered. She closed her eyes again just for a second, and in the darkness of her mind, she wasn't in a restaurant. She was on a stage, the warm lights on her face, the hush of an expectant audience before her. She was home. She would sing for him. But she wouldn't be singing for the money or for him. She would be singing for Liam. She would be singing for her stolen dreams. And she would sing something that this cold, empty man would never ever forget. The silence in Aria was no longer just a hush. It was a physical presence, a held breath stretching across dozens of people. The clinking of cutlery had ceased. Conversations had died mid-sentence. Every patron, every waiter, every chef peering through the kitchen door was focused on the lone figure of the waitress standing by the corner table. Beck Wilder watched his arms cross the smirk, still playing on his lips. This was the pinnacle of his power trip. He expected a shaky rendition of a pop song, or perhaps a mumbled off-key happy birthday. He was ready to laugh, to dismiss her, to take his victory and leave. Giselle took one final centering breath. She did not look at Beck. She did not look at the money. She looked out at the glittering expanse of the New York City skyline, a universe of tiny distant lights, and let it become her audience. And then she began to sing. It was not a pop song. It was not a show tune. From her lips came the opening notes of Giacomo Puccini's O mio babbino caro from the opera Gianni Schicchi. The first note was a thread of liquid gold, impossibly pure and clear. It cut through the thick silence of the restaurant with a beauty so profound it was jarring. It was a sound that did not belong amongst the plates of half-eaten food and glasses of expensive wine. It belonged in concert halls and cathedrals under the grand proscenium arches of the world's great opera houses. Beck's smirk faltered. His eyebrows drew together in confusion. He recognized the melody. It was faint, a ghost from a life he had locked away. Giselle's voice, tentative for a mere second, swelled with power and emotion. She wasn't just singing the notes, she was inhabiting them. The aria is a daughter's plea to her father, a desperate appeal for love and understanding. But in Giselle's voice it became something more. It was the plea for her brother's life. It was the cry of every dream she had been forced to sacrifice. It was a torrent of pure, untamed emotion, refined by years of training, but unleashed by months of desperation. O mio babbino caro, mi piace, è bello bello. Oh, my dear papa, I love him. He is so handsome. Her voice soared, climbing the scale with effortless grace. Her Italian was flawless, her phrasing immaculate. The waitress was gone. In her place stood an artist, a diva. Her hands, which had trembled just moments before, now gestured with the fluid passion of a seasoned performer, carving the story of the music into the air. She was channeling every ounce of her fear, her anger, her love for Liam into the performance. The effect on the room was staggering. Patrons sat mesmerized, their forks hovering, forgotten over their plates. A woman in a Chanel dress dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. The kitchen staff, hardened and cynical, were clustered at the service door, their mouths agape. Marcus, the maitre d', stood by the host, stand his face a mask of utter disbelief and awe. He wasn't seeing a waitress. He was seeing a star. Somewhere in the back, a young waiter, realizing the gravity of the moment, had discreetly started filming on his phone. But the most profound transformation was happening at the corner table. As Giselle's voice reached the heart-wrenching climax of the aria, Beck Wilder's carefully constructed facade shattered. The music, this specific music, was a key turning a lock. Deep inside him, he hadn't known was still there. Isabella had loved this aria. She had played it on her violin, her own arrangement filling their home with its beautiful pleading melody. She would play it for him, after he'd had a difficult day, her bow dancing across the strings, her eyes smiling at him. It was their song. The sound of Giselle's voice, so full of authentic pain and longing, didn't just remind him of Isabella. For a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, it was Isabella. The restaurant, the city lights, the stack of money, it all dissolved. He was back in their living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, and the love of his life was playing for him. The grief he had suppressed for 5 years, the monumental sorrow he had buried under a mountain of work and anger, erupted. His icy composure melted away. The muscles in his jaw, perpetually tight, went slack. His cold, dead eyes suddenly filled with a shocking, raw emotion. He remembered Isabella's laugh. He remembered the feel of her hand in his. He remembered everything he had lost, everything he had tried so desperately to forget. E se l'amassi in d'Arno andrei sul Ponte Vecchio, ma per buttarmi in Arno. And if my love were in vain, I would go to the Ponte Vecchio and throw myself in the Arno. As Giselle sang the final desperate lines, her voice swelling with a tragic beauty, before fading into a whisper that hung in the air like dust in a sunbeam, a single tear escaped Beck's eye and traced a path down his stone-like face. He didn't wipe it away. He couldn't move. He was completely, utterly broken. The song ended. Absolute silence reigned for a full 5 seconds. It was a sacred, stunned quiet. Then one person started to clap. It was a tentative, solitary sound. Then another joined, and and within moments, the entire restaurant patrons and staff alike erupted into a thunderous, spontaneous standing ovation. The applause was deafening, a wave of pure, unadulterated admiration. They weren't clapping for a waitress who had completed a dare. They were cheering for an artist who had just given the performance of a lifetime. Giselle stood, her chest heaving the adrenaline and emotion, leaving her trembling. She slowly brought her gaze back from the window, back to the room, blinking at the sea of clapping, smiling faces. It was overwhelming. Tears welled in her own eyes, not of humiliation, but of release. For 3 minutes, she had been herself again. Then her eyes found Beck Wilder. He was not clapping. He was staring at her. His face a wreck of emotions she could not decipher. Shock, pain, confusion, and something else. Something that looked terrifyingly like recognition. The cruel, mocking billionaire was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had just seen a ghost. The single tear still glistened on his cheek, a testament to the power of what had just happened. The dare was over. The entertainment had been provided, but the story, Giselle realized with a jolt of fear and premonition, had only just begun. The applause eventually subsided, leaving a strange, supercharged energy in the room. The spell was broken, but the magic lingered. Diners spoke in hushed, excited tones, all looking towards the corner table. Giselle, still standing, felt exposed and unsteady, as if she had just woken from a vivid dream. She looked at the table. The stack of cash, the reason for this entire spectacle, sat there almost obscene in its stark reality. Then she looked at Beck Wilder. He was still staring at her, his expression unreadable. He slowly rose to his feet, his movements stiff. He walked around the table until he stood directly in front of her. The entire restaurant held its breath again. Was he going to yell at her, dismiss her? "Who are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse, stripped of its earlier arrogance. It was a genuine question laced with a deep, unsettling confusion. Before Giselle could answer, Marcus the maitre d'imme swiftly intervened, sensing the situation was far too volatile. "Mr. Wilder, your car is ready whenever you are. Please allow us to handle everything." He gently but firmly guided Beck away from Giselle and towards the exit, speaking to him in low, placating tones. Beck didn't resist. He walked like a man in a trance, casting one last haunted look back at Giselle before disappearing through the doors. The moment he was gone, the tension in Giselle's body released in a dizzying rush. Her colleagues swarmed her, their faces alight with excitement and concern. "Giselle, that was—" "My God, I have no words," said Maria, another waitress. "Where did you learn to sing like that? You were incredible." The young busboy who had bumped her exclaimed, his earlier fear replaced by hero worship. Giselle could only offer a weak, shaky smile. She felt disconnected from her own body. Marcus approached her, his expression a mixture of awe and professional anxiety. "Giselle," he began, I don't know what to say. In 20 years in this business, I've never seen anything like it. But you do understand this was a massive breach of protocol." "I know, Marcus. I'm sorry. I thought I was going to be fired," she whispered. He sighed, running a hand over his face. "Fired Giselle. If I fired you, I think half the staff and every customer in this room would walk out. But we have a problem." He gestured towards the table. The money. The $10,000 was still there. It was a temptation and a poison. Taking it felt like accepting payment for her own humiliation. Leaving it felt like a foolish act of pride when Liam's needs were so great. I can't," she said, shaking her head. Marcus nodded, understanding. "Leave it. I'll have it sent back to Mr. Wilder's office tomorrow with a formal apology from the restaurant. Go home, Giselle. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow." Numbly, Giselle collected her things from the staff room and made her way out into the cool night air. The city lights, which had been her silent audience, now seemed to mock her. The subway ride home was a blur. She felt hollowed out, as if the song had taken everything she had left to give. She didn't know that the young waiter Kevin had already uploaded the video. He hadn't done it maliciously. He was young, caught up in the moment, and thought it was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. He'd titled it, "Millionaire Jerk Demands Waitress Sing, Gets Opera Concert," instead, and posted it to TikTok and YouTube. By the time Giselle woke up the next morning, after a restless sleep, the storm had already broken. Her phone, usually silent save for alarms and texts from her mother, was a vibrating, chiming brick of notifications. It had died overnight from the sheer volume of activity. When she plugged it in and it sprang to life, she was confronted with a deluge of messages, friend requests, and alerts. Her GoFundMe for Liam, which had sat at $7,450 for weeks, had exploded. It was now at $50,000, then $75,000, then over $100,000. The numbers were climbing so fast she thought it was a glitch. Donations were pouring in from all over the world, with messages like, "For Liam, from a fan of his sister's voice," and "Your talent is a gift. Here's a little gift back." Confused and overwhelmed, she clicked on a link a friend from high school had sent her. And there she was. The video was shaky, the audio slightly distorted, but it was unmistakably her standing in her waitress uniform, her voice soaring through, "Aria." The title made her cringe, but the comments below were a tidal wave of support. "That's not a waitress, that's an angel." The way the rich guy's face changes, priceless. Juilliard dropout here. I recognize that technique. That is world-class training. Someone get this woman a record deal immediately. The video had gone nuclear. It had been shared by celebrities, news outlets, and music critics. "I'm a singing waitress" was trending on Twitter. By noon, news vans were parked outside her apartment building. Reporters were shouting her name, trying to get a comment. Her quiet, anonymous life had been obliterated in less than 12 hours. The phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. "Is this Giselle Rutledge?" a crisp professional voice asked. "Yes. Ms. Rutledge, my name is David Chen. I'm the Dean of Vocal Arts at the Juilliard School." Giselle sank onto her couch, her knees weak. "Dean Chen," she whispered. He had been one of her most ardent supporters. "Giselle, I just saw a video. I almost fell out of my chair. We have been so worried about you since you left. Why didn't you tell us what was happening? The school has resources, donor funds for student emergencies." His voice was kind but filled with a gentle reprimand. "Your scholarship is still here for you, Giselle. Whenever you're ready to come back." Tears streamed down her face as she mumbled her thanks. The calls kept coming. A famous daytime talk show, a major record label, a prominent artist management agency. Her world was spinning a dizzying mix of hope, fear, and utter shock. This was the dream she had given up on, roaring back to life with the force of a hurricane. Meanwhile, in his sterile office high above the city, Beck Wilder was also dealing with the fallout. The video was inescapable. His PR team was in full crisis mode. The narrative had been set. Beck Wilder, the callous billionaire, had tried to humiliate a poor waitress, only to be humbled by her divine talent. He was being portrayed as a villain in a real-life fairy tale. His company's stock had even taken a small but noticeable dip. But Beck didn't care about the stock. He didn't care about the bad press. He had spent the night sleepless, pacing his silent mansion, the ghost of Isabella's music echoing in his ears. The waitress Giselle Rutledge, he had learned her name from the news, had done more than embarrass him. She had resurrected a part of him he had tried to kill. He watched the video again and again on his computer. He saw his own face, the arrogant smirk, the casual cruelty. He barely recognized the man he had become. And then he saw the moment his expression breaks, the instant the music hits him. He saw his own grief raw and exposed for the entire world to see. It was humiliating, but it was also true. He knew what he had to do. It wasn't about PR or damage control. It was about the song. It was about the ghost in the room. It was about the woman who had, for 3 minutes, brought his wife back to life. He couldn't send the money back. He couldn't issue a press release. He had to see her. He had to understand. He picked up the phone and called his head of security. "Find out where Giselle Rutledge lives. I'm going to see her. And make sure there are no reporters around when I get there." Getting to Giselle's apartment was a tactical operation. Beck's security team, accustomed to discreet corporate maneuvers, cleared a path through the media circus, camped outside her modest Queens building. They created a brief, efficient bubble of privacy, allowing Beck to slip through a service entrance and up to her 4th-floor walk-up unnoticed. When he knocked on her door, Giselle froze. She had been ignoring the persistent shouts of the reporters outside her apartment, feeling like a flimsy sanctuary. She expected it was her landlord or a persistent neighbor. When she looked through the peephole and saw Beck Wilder standing in the hallway, his face pale and serious, her heart hammered against her ribs. Her first instinct was to slam the deadbolt and hide. What could he possibly want? To threaten her, to offer her more money, to be quiet? She thought of the viral video of the power it had unexpectedly given her. She was no longer just his waitress. She took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and opened it just enough to talk. "Mr. Wilder," she said, her voice cool and steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside her. He looked haggard, far from the imperious figure in the restaurant. His expensive suit was slightly rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Ms. Rutledge, Giselle, may I come in just for a moment?" She hesitated, then opened the door wider. "You have 5 minutes." He stepped inside, and the sheer contrast of his presence in her tiny apartment was jarring. He was a man accustomed to mansions and boardrooms, and he looked utterly out of place amongst her worn-out furniture, stacked books, and the faint smell of instant coffee. His eyes scanned the room, lingering for a moment on a framed photo on her bookshelf, the one of her, and a smiling Liam. "I didn't come here to threaten you or to talk about what happened online." He began, his voice low. "The money from the restaurant, I'm having it transferred directly to the GoFundMe page for your brother, along with a more substantial contribution." Giselle stiffened. "I don't want your charity." "It's not charity," he said, shaking his head. "It's a debt, a ridiculously small one for what you did." He paused, struggling to find the words. This was unfamiliar territory for him. Apology and vulnerability were foreign languages. "That song," he finally said, his gaze distant. "O mio babino caro." "Why did you choose that one?" Giselle crossed her arms, her guard still up. It felt appropriate, a daughter's plea. She left the rest, unsaid, "My plea for my brother's life." Beck nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the photo of Liam. "My wife, Isabella, she was a violinist, a brilliant one. That was her favorite piece to play. She had her own arrangement of it. She would play it for me." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. Suddenly, his reaction in the restaurant made a terrible, tragic sense. He wasn't just a cruel man. He was a grieving one. The coldness was a shield, his anger a fortress built around a broken heart. Giselle felt a flicker of something she didn't expect: empathy. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly, and she meant it. He finally met her eyes, and for the first time she saw past the billionaire and the tyrant to the man underneath. He looked lost. "What you did last night," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "For 3 minutes you made the world stop. You brought back a memory, a feeling. I have spent 5 years building walls, and you shattered them with a song. I acted abominably. My behavior was inexcusable. I was cruel because my own life felt empty, and I wanted to make someone else feel as small as I did. For that, I am truly sorry." The apology was simple, direct, and utterly sincere. It disarmed Giselle completely. "The world now sees me as a villain, and you as a saint," he said with a wry, tired smile. "Perhaps they're right, but the story is more complicated than that. You have this gift, this incredible world-changing gift, and you're wasting it serving overpriced food to men like me because of money." He gestured towards Liam's photo. "Because of him. It's not a waste if it's for him." Giselle countered, her voice fierce with protective love. "No," Beck agreed, "but there's a better way. I spent the night thinking about Isabella, about her music. When she died, I locked it all away. I let her legacy die with her. I see now that was the greatest betrayal of all." He took a step closer, his eyes intense. "I want to make you a real offer, not a handout, a proposition. I'm starting a foundation, the Isabella Wilder Foundation for the Arts. Its mission will be to find exceptional young artists who have been sidelined by life, by tragedy, by circumstance, and give them the resources they need to reclaim their dreams. Full funding, management, connections, everything." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I want you to be its first recipient, Giselle. We will fully fund your brother's treatment in Switzerland, all of it. Travel accommodation, the best doctors. No more GoFundMe, no more worrying. And we will fund your return to music, Juilliard private coaching, a debut concert, an album, whatever you need. You will never have to serve another table as long as you live." Giselle was speechless. It was an offer beyond her wildest imaginings. It was a life raft, a winning lottery ticket, a fairy godmother's wish all rolled into one. But a sliver of suspicion remained. "Why?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Why do all this for me?" "Because you gave me something I thought was gone forever," he said, his voice raw. "You reminded me of what truly matters. This isn't just for you. It's for Isabella. It's for every artist with a voice that deserves to be heard. And selfishly, it's for me. To build something that creates beauty instead of just crushing competitors. To build a bridge back to the man I was when she was alive." He looked at her, his expression open and vulnerable. "You don't have to be my project. This would be a partnership. You would help me build this foundation. Your story, your talent would be its cornerstone. You would help others like you. But the choice is yours, no strings attached. My financial commitment to your brother's care is unconditional, whether you accept the rest of the offer or not." Giselle looked from his earnest, haunted face to the picture of her smiling brother. The weight that had been crushing her for 18 months began to lift. The path forward was no longer a dark tunnel of endless work and worry. A door had been thrown open, flooding her world with light. It was a light ignited by a moment of cruelty, but fanned into a flame by a shared note of grief and a song of impossible beauty. Her life had been a quiet, desperate plea, and somehow, in the most unlikely way imaginable, the universe had finally answered. Accepting Beck's offer was one thing. Navigating the reality of it was another. The world did not simply reset. The change was a whirlwind, a seismic shift that reshaped the landscape of Giselle's life with breathtaking speed. The first step was Liam. Within 48 hours, Beck's top legal and medical liaisons had made contact. Dr. Alistair Finch, the world-renowned specialist in Switzerland, had reviewed Liam's case. A plan was formulated. A private medical jet was chartered. Giselle's mother, initially bewildered and suspicious of the sudden windfall, wept with joy when Giselle explained the full story. Saying goodbye to Liam at the airport was heart-wrenching, but filled with a profound, shimmering hope that had been absent for so long. "You go be a superstar, Ella," Liam said from his wheelchair, his voice weak but his eyes bright. "I'll be in the front row when I get back. You just focus on getting better," she said, hugging him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I love you." As the jet took off, carrying her brother and mother towards a future she had only dared to dream of, Giselle felt the first true sense of peace she had known in years. The crushing burden of his care was lifted not by her own frantic efforts, but by an act of transformative grace born from a moment of public humiliation. The irony was not lost on her. With Liam's future secured, the second part of the proposition began. Beck was true to his word. This was not a passive patronage. It was an active, all-consuming project for him. He seemed to shed his corporate predator skin, replaced by a man driven by a newfound, almost frantic purpose. He poured the same relentless energy he had once used for hostile takeovers into building the Isabella Wilder Foundation. Giselle's life became a series of meetings in sleek boardrooms that felt like alien planets. Lawyers drafted contracts not for her servitude, but for her empowerment. She was given a seat on the foundation's board. Her input was not just requested, it was required. "You're the soul of this Giselle," Beck told her during one meeting, pushing a stack of documents across a vast mahogany table. "I know finance and logistics. You know the heart of it. You know what an artist truly needs." She moved out of her tiny Queens apartment and into a beautiful, spacious brownstone in Brooklyn, paid for by the foundation as part of her artist residency. It had a soundproofed music room with a brand new Steinway grand piano. The first time she sat at it and let her fingers drift over the keys, she cried. It felt like coming home after a long and brutal exile. She re-enrolled at Juilliard, not as a desperate student, but as a returning prodigy. Dean Chen welcomed her with open arms. The news of her partnership with the Wilder Foundation made waves in the classical music world. She was no longer just the singing waitress. She was Giselle Rutledge, the inaugural Wilder Fellow, a symbol of reclaimed artistry. The work was demanding. She began intensive vocal coaching with a legendary instructor, a formidable Russian woman named Madame Petrova, who worked her to the point of exhaustion, rebuilding the muscles and stamina her voice had lost. "The gift is from God, Petrova would say, her accent thick. "But the technique is from work. You have been silent. Now you must learn to roar again." Her relationship with Beck evolved into something complex and strange. They were not quite friends, not quite colleagues. They were two survivors of different shipwrecks now bound together in the task of building a lighthouse. He was often formal, and Reserve still awkward with genuine emotion. But she saw flashes of the man he must have been with Isabella. He would sometimes talk about her, sharing small anecdotes about her passion for music, her mischievous sense of humor. In those moments, the cold billionaire vanished completely. One afternoon, he took her to the secure vault where he kept Isabella's violin. He opened the case with a reverence that was almost painful to watch. The instrument, a Guarneri del Gesù, lay on a bed of velvet, its wood glowing with a warm, deep light. "She called it Leo," he said, his voice soft, "because she said it had the heart of a lion. I haven't opened this case in 5 years." He looked at Giselle. "She would have loved your voice. She would have demanded you two perform together." It was a moment of profound connection, a shared understanding of loss and the enduring power of art. The Foundation's launch was a major media event. At a press conference, Beck, flanked by Giselle, announced its mission. He spoke not of profit margins or market shares, but of second chances and the vital importance of beauty in a broken world. He told a sanitized version of their story, framing it as a moment of unexpected discovery. But when a reporter asked Giselle what it was like to sing for him, that night she didn't stick to the PR script. That night, she said, her voice clear and strong, her eyes finding Beck's in the crowd, "I sang out of desperation, I sang for my brother. But I also discovered that even in a moment of profound humiliation, there can be a strange kind of grace. A single song can be a bridge. It connected me to the kindness of strangers all over the world, and it connected me to the part of Mr. Wilder that he had hidden away. It reminded us both that art isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline." Her honesty silenced the room. Beck gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod of respect. In that moment, their partnership was sealed, not by contracts, but by a shared public truth. Weeks turned into months. Giselle thrived. Her voice grew stronger, richer, more expressive than ever before. She was not just reclaiming her old talent. She was surpassing it, infusing it with the depth and wisdom of her experience. The news from Switzerland was all positive. Liam's treatment was working. He was regaining strength, and the doctors were optimistic. The Foundation announced its centerpiece event, the Isabella Wilder Inaugural Concert. It would be held at Carnegie Hall, and its featured performer singing with a full orchestra would be Giselle Rutledge. The concert sold out in under an hour. The little bird who was told to sing for her supper was now preparing to command one of the most famous stages in the world. The air backstage at Carnegie Hall was thick with a unique blend of nervous energy and historic reverence. Giselle could feel the ghosts of the legends who had stood in these same wings, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Callas. She wore a stunning deep sapphire gown, a stark contrast to the drab black and white uniform she had worn at Aria. The dress had been a gift from Beck, chosen for its color. "It matches your eyes when you sing," he had said, a rare, almost shy compliment. She looked at her reflection in the dressing room mirror. The tired, haunted woman who had served Beck Wilder was gone. In her place was an artist poised and ready, her eyes shining not with desperation, but with a fierce, calm light. There was a soft knock on the door. It was Beck. He wasn't wearing his usual power suit, but a classic, elegant tuxedo. He looked less like a CEO and more like a patron of the arts, the man he was perhaps always meant to be. "They're ready for you," he said, his voice quiet. He held out a small velvet box. "This is for you, from me and from Isabella." Giselle opened it. Nestled inside was a single perfect gardenia, fashioned into a hairpin. It was her favorite flower, Beck explained. She always wore one in her hair when she performed. She said it brought her luck. Tears welled in Giselle's eyes. "Thank you, Beck." It was the first time she had used his first name without the formal title. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "Break a leg, Giselle." As she walked towards the stage, the muted roar of the full house grew louder. She took her place in the wings and peered through the curtain. The hall was a breathtaking sea of faces. She saw Dean Chen and Madame Petrova in the front rows, beaming with pride. She saw her former colleagues from Aria, including Marcus, who Beck had personally invited and flown in. And then, in the center box, she saw him. Liam. He was out of his wheelchair, looking thin but healthy, a vibrant smile on his face. Beside him, her mother was weeping silently with joy. And next to them sat Beck, watching her with an expression of profound gratitude. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra began the introduction to her first piece. It was not O mio babino caro. They had decided together that that song belonged to the restaurant, to that one specific transformative moment. Instead, the first notes of Visi d'arte from Puccini's Tosca filled the hall. The title translated to I lived for art. It was an anthem for every choice she had made, every sacrifice, every note she had ever sung. Giselle walked onto the stage into the warm, bright spotlight. The applause was thunderous. She bowed, took a deep breath, and locked eyes with her brother. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to shut the world out, but to draw it all in, the pain, the joy, the sacrifice, the redemption. Then she opened her mouth and sang. Her voice, no longer a prisoner, filled every corner of the legendary hall. It was a sound of breathtaking power and heartbreaking vulnerability. It was the voice of a woman who had been to the depths of despair and had returned not just intact, but stronger. It was the voice of a life reclaimed. She sang of art, of love, of faith, of sorrow. Each note was a testament to her journey. Beck watched mesmerized. He wasn't just hearing Giselle's voice. He was hearing the echo of Isabella's violin, the laughter in their home, the music he had tried to silence. But now, it wasn't a source of pain. It was a source of peace. The ghost was no longer haunting him. She was smiling. When the final note faded into the hallowed silence of Carnegie Hall, there was a beat of stunned quiet, just like in the restaurant. Then the entire audience surged to its feet, the applause and cheers echoing like a tidal wave. It was more than an ovation. It was a coronation. Giselle stood, tears of pure joy streaming down her face, bowing to the crowd, to the orchestra, and finally towards the center box where her past, her present, and her future all sat together. Liam was cheering, her mother was overcome, and Beck was applauding his face, illuminated by a genuine, unburdened happiness. The millionaire had demanded entertainment. The waitress had delivered a miracle. And in the process, 2 broken lives had been remade not by money, but by the transcendent power of a single unexpected song. That night at Carnegie Hall wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. Giselle Rutledge went on to become one of the most celebrated voices of her generation, but she never forgot where she came from. The Isabella Wilder Foundation has since helped dozens of other artists reclaim their stolen dreams, a lasting testament to the woman whose love for music inspired it all. Giselle's story and Beck's transformation are a powerful reminder that we never truly know the battles others are fighting or the incredible gifts they may be hiding. It teaches us that behind a veil of arrogance can lie deep-seated pain, and within the quietest person can be a voice that moves the world. If Giselle's story of resilience and the surprising power of empathy moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories that prove that a single moment of courage, a single act of kindness, or a single unexpected song can change everything. Thank you for listening.